Hi, welcome back to the Mob Mentality Show. My name is Austin Chadwick and co-host is Chris Lucian. And today, very excited to have Lennart Fridén on the show to talk about some awesome topics, including sticky mob programming, technical coaching, being embedded in a team or mob and trying to make yourself redundant, and team composition based on preferences. Before jumping to those topics and maybe anything else we might find ourselves improving into, um, Lennart, do you mind giving an introduction for yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me. My name is Lennart Fridén. I'm a developer, coach these days, living in Sweden and Stockholm, Sweden. And working for the past 20 years or so, developing software, and a bit of more than 10 years, I think it was 2013, really early actually. I stumbled across this little thing called mob programming, and met Woody, as so many of us have, and that put me onto the current trajectory of my life, so to speak. And I'm better for it, and I really can't do anything but it at this time.
Nice, nice, fantastic. Yeah, that's similar journey for me, and as you said, many others. So very, very cool. Um, Jumping into the first topic is quite interesting to me. I was actually thinking and talking about it with others before this discussion here, which was the idea of sticky mob programming. What comes to mind, even though I don't know hardly anything about it, is I've heard of like sticky team conferences and things like this, or like sticky teams. Yeah, what comes to mind for you for sticky mob programming? Yeah, Lennart.
So, so when I use the word sticky,
Yeah.
it's really about having a habit, creating a habit that sticks. So sticky mob
Mm.
programming to me is making sure that mob programming is a habit that sticks, and it's not dependent on anyone particular being there, advocating it, acting as the engine, so to speak, to keep it going, but rather it just becomes this infused habit that permeates a team and organization, and people do it. It's a good default habit that people just do, rather than having to be whipped or gently nudged or helped along the way. I mean, those are great ways. Well, actually, not the first one. Whipping is for the bedroom. It's not for instilling work habits into people. But getting people going, that takes a lot of effort, really, and it takes a lot of thought on how to best go about it. But once you reach the nirvana, so to speak, when it just happens, that's your cue. That's when you know that you've made a habit that sticks, and now you can move on. You can go forth and do some good somewhere else. So that's basically touching on the notion of how can we create good habits that stick even when we're no longer there to make them happen, so to speak.
Right. Nice. Yeah. And I think for me, this is a good one because there's so many applications of it. Like I know it comes up a lot within the extreme programming community is, how come it doesn't stick, right? And it's
Mm -hmm.
what I've heard before too, that's come up on the show before. Is kind of like, well, how does good diet and exercise not stick, and things like that, right? Um, yeah, 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 and
I mean, that's
yeah,
that's you're really onto something there, because
yeah,
taking extreme programming, which I truly see mob programming as just a natural evolution of the pair programming from XP. Um, I mean, uh, getting crisps and staying on the sofa and watching telly. That's basically what people do when they don't go out. Put on the tracksuit and the sneakers and go out running, and you can basically ask the exact same question around topics such as, why don't people stick to test-driven development? I mean, we know it's good for you. More often than not, it's going to help you, and it's going to help you immensely. Why don't people just do it? because it's easier to fall back into the old habits. And the old habits are those that we were acquired, and those that we have been, sort of probably not consciously trained, but they just have happened as along the way. And those bad habits we picked up are things like, no, I'm just going to write the code first. I think I know the solution to this problem. Let me just write the code. Why should I write a test? Why should we even bring the mob together to tackle a problem that is obviously so trivial? I can do it all on my own. And simsalabim, abracadabra, and now you got a bug, a problem out in production because it was so trivial and you were so lax about it because, hey, this just takes me 5 minutes to fix. I don't need another pair of eyes. I don't need a number of navigators that keep me on track and actually checks my assumptions. I can just take this and run with it. And now production is burning. It happens all the time. But these are the bad habits that we need to consciously deprogram ourselves from and get into thinking, how can we sort of, dump those old programs and insert the good habits, the good programs into our wetware. So that's really what sticky mob programming is to me, because secret, you can just add sticky in front of any good habit you want and start thinking, how can we sort of get this good habit to stick? Mob programming just happens to be the topic du jour.
Yeah, I don't want to say sticky celery eating because it's a good habit to eat celery.
Yeah.
Sticky celery, Chris? I don't know. I know it's starting to sound.
There's a Swedish comedian comedy duo back from the 80s, which had pardon the pun, they had a shtick about celery eating, basically with these two chefs. I'll send you some video clips and add some translations. It'll have to be sort of get into the extended show notes, which is sort of the next level once you're starting to dive deeper into things beyond what we're talking here today.
Sounds good. So what are your biggest successes and biggest frustrations with the stickiness of mobbing in general? How did you come to this topic? What was what brought you here?
So the thing is, I've been introducing teams and organizations to mob programming for well over 10 years now. And lately I started thinking about why didn't it stick everywhere? Or when it did, what made it stick? And the realization I came to is that, to me, there are a number of factors that need to be sort of be there to get a good habit such as mob programming to stick. And I started thinking about, can I sort of just getting those done, organizing those factors and naming them so I can start talking about them a little bit. And to me, I think I identified a number of roles. When things have stuck, when a good habit actually sticks around even after you leave the place, it's very seldom due to you coming there as an outsider, singing the gospel and the praise of mob programming, so to speak, and then leaving because you made such a convincing sermon. So now obviously they will just keep doing the good thing. Nope, that's not at all. That's just the first step. That's just the inspiration. That's taking the inside perspective, sitting in an organization or in a team, and people saying, okay, me personally, I would love for us to start mob programming. Okay, how can I convince my colleagues? And it's so hard being a prophet in your own hometown. It's much easier to pointing to a success story, an external success story. Look at Hunter, look at all Woody, look at all these other companies that are mob programming. Did you know that other bank, our competitor, they're using mob programming? They're leaving us in the dust if we don't start doing it, nudge, nudge, hint, hint. So pointing to external success stories and examples, that role, so to speak, that's what I refer to as the outsider. It could absolutely be someone that shows up, they do a workshop, they might stick around for a while and do a couple of trainings, but in the long run, those are not the ones that are actually going to make the good habits stick, because you need to have a couple of other roles fulfilled as well. One of those is what I refer to the insider. That would be that aforementioned person sitting in a team, or might be a boss, might be someone in management, having a think about, how can I get my developers to produce better, higher quality software? How can I get people actually to start sharing what they know about the problem domain and ways of solving problems in general? I know. I need to get them to at least try mob programming, and being a manager, then and probably you've got a nice budget for workshops. You're the one pulling in someone, as Woody or me or someone else doing a workshop and training. So you're sort of the one getting things going internally, and you're probably also going to be initially the engine, so to speak, for getting this habit rolling. But there's another role that I know that I've identified whenever I've seen it work, whenever I've seen any habit really stick, it always comes down to this paramount role, which I call the first follower. The first follower is basically, imagine yourself being up on the dance floor. You're that, pardon, crazy person dancing all on your own. People are just looking at you and thinking,
I remember those days.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, someone else steps up to the dance floor, and all of a sudden the party gets going. But it always takes that first follower to get things rolling and keep them rolling.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever I've seen mob programming stick around, it's basically because I've been able to identify, or whoever is trying to get people to mob programming, they have been able to identify who are the ones that probably wouldn't be the ones that take the initiative, saying, hey, let's try mob programming, but are very eager to give it a go and keep it going if they only get a chance to try it. Right. But finding those, identifying those beforehand, greatly increases the chance of making this not just a one-time workshop or a week of training, but actually getting this into becoming a habit that sticks around, and getting people to really try it for real for an extended period of time.
Nice. And I guess kind of following up the second part of Chris's question, have you ever seen it fall through when any one of those roles are missing? You have like an example that comes to mind. Yeah. You don't have to call anybody up, or company specifically, just
yes, I have, and it is almost always. I mean, I know that I can be a bit of a force of nature. So if I end up in a role such as a team coach or technical coach in a team, as long as I'm there, I can be the engine. I can get people, and I can, I can be quite persuasive, and I can get people to give it a try. But it's always what happens when I step away from that situation. When I'm not there, do they keep going, or do they just default back to older habits of working on their own? And I've seen that a couple of times, which sort of really have made me being on the lookout for, okay, in this crowd of potential mob programmers, who are the ones that actually want to give it a go and give it an earnest try, not just a day or a week, but let's try this for 6 months and see if it's worthwhile. So finding those are key, and I've seen both shares, and to some extent, I've also seen places where I've only been there a short while, but I gave them the inspiration to give it a try, and couple of those places are still doing it, and probably my input was just enough for them to, from being the outsider, so to speak, giving them enough impetus to keep investigating, keep giving it a try. Probably doing, organizing workshops, having other facilitators.
Nice.
There are definitely, I've got my shares of success stories and fall throughs for sure.
Yeah. And I think to yes and to what you're saying, I've seen it happen to me before as well. And maybe using your set of roles, reflecting on what happened where mobbing did not continue after I left a team organization, was maybe a half-hearted first follower. Is maybe what happened. Just guessing, but like if I think about the power of habit, it seemed like after I left, they still had cue, routine, reward, and they still had pretty decent weak and strong ties to keep mobbing. But I remember the power of habit book talking about belief, that if someone doesn't really believe in the thing, when the going gets tough or there's resistance, or like it's kind of like, I don't feel like running today or eating the celery.
Yeah.
You have to really believe it, right? So that's one guess at maybe what happened. And so maybe the first followers were believed enough to follow the insider, but not enough to keep going, so to speak, on their own, or something like that.
Like
I don't know. Have you ever seen anything similar? Or go ahead, Chris. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say it's like crossing the chasm and the diffusion of innovation, or the extension of the diffusion of innovation, right? It's like at some point you do need to have that critical mass to cross that chasm. And I guess, I think some of it is like, thinking about habits. And I think a lot of people don't understand habits well. So they, and a lot of people are kind of drawn to instant gratification. I think if you look at any type of social media out there these days, I think a lot of it has shifted towards a quick dopamine hit. And so I think people are becoming maybe less disciplined, not more disciplined over time. And so that might have something to do with it as well. I think is just like culturally speaking, globally, we are falling farther away from good habit formation.
That is odd, really, because, well, I mean, it's understandable given the society and given the influences we have around us. But the adage of the flesh is weak and the mind is weak as well. It's, if you boil it down, when it comes to good habits, it's it's really some form of discipline and knowing why it's good for you, and having that realization. Almost always, I mean, you can do something just mechanically over and over again, and you sort of build a muscle memory, and then that turns into a habit. But having the deep understanding of why is this good for me or for us in the long run, and instilling that realization, that I think is really at the forefront of making sure that people not just only, I mean, people are easy to convince. Let's give this a try. Let's just sit down, all the brilliant minds in the same room, or physically or virtually, and have a go at the same problem at the same time. You can do that easily enough in most contexts, but then conveying, now imagine the gains we can get by doing this all day, every day, and really getting people to understand the upside of doing things that way, rather than reverting to the old habit, which is tried and tested and we know all its flaws. But we do it anyway because it's basically it's a habit. It's I mean, most of the so-called virtues of XP are about discipline. I mean, what is TDD if not discipline? What is the red-green refactor cycle if not discipline? What is do separate commits for behavioral changes and structural changes? What is that if not discipline? and then explaining to people why it's a good thing might sort of get through to some, not everyone, but at least to some. It's what we hope for.
Right, absolutely. And I think when trying to make a habit stick, you certainly want to start with why, right? If you have a bunch of book titles. Start with why and Atomic Habits. One of my favorite things about Atomic Habits actually was talking about how willpower is a muscle, and how it's like sometimes just showing up is more important. It's like, let's write one test each day, rather than TDD all day and gradually grow the muscle. There's certainly something to be said about that. It's a funny thing, but the team that I was on before we started mob programming with Woody and everybody, we were not unit testing at all. We started mobbing before we started unit testing, and I think a lot of people don't know that. And it's the unit testing came as a side effect of the mobbing, and the mobbing came as a response to an emergency, right? And there was certainly learning about TDD and randories and things like that. But it was very funny when I joined the company. I was expecting, like, because I've heard Woody talk before then, and this was, I don't know, 14 years ago now. And so I was expecting, like, very agile and all this other stuff. But Woody
And
had
reality
recently
hits.
joined, and then I had recently joined. And so it was really interesting, but we quickly got into mobbing, and then from mobbing we quickly got to TDD, and then incrementally better and better practices over time. In more recent years, like database continuous integration, serverless, all kinds of other things that you would think of as virtuous infrastructure as code, so on. And so it has been like incremental over time, and it was like, we're going to learn, we're going to retrospect, then things will come out of that, like mobbing, like TDD, like all these other practices. And so, the virtuous habit that I think of as being a key factor is retrospectives that have that single action item at the end, so that you can move, but you might hit a ceiling if your knowledge is not expanding. So then dedicated learning time to expand knowledge, so that the group can evolve over time. So I don't know. I like those concepts for stickiness as well.
For sure. I've seen the exact same thing over and over again, where mob programming acts as a vessel to introduce other good habits.
Right.
They just come along for the ride. Very much the same thing when it comes to introducing TDD to fairly new or junior developers. Been doing that for a number of years, showing, introducing people to new languages or frameworks. Much the same thing, that having the need to learn something can also be turned into a very good vessel to get people to try mob programming. Yes, we all need to start building things this way. Do we know it? No. Let's go explore, but we can do it together. And now you have people mob programming, mob learning. I mean, that's what it is. Sharing is caring, getting people to not just working on their own, but rather seeing one, doing one, and teaching one, and all bundled up into one neat little package. So coming back to what you mentioned previously, Austin, about half-hearted first followers. I mean, at the end of the day, in order to be able to leave a situation and leave a context, might not be so drastic that you leave the company. It's just that, you move on and you start helping another team. Once in order to get there, then you basically need to have sort of convinced that first following to becoming an insider, so to speak, and made sure that they have a first follower to rely on to keep the practice going. And in the best of all worlds, all the the entire team will be a bunch of insiders and first followers.
Yeah, yeah. And I think um maybe you said it there and I missed part of it, but one thing I was thinking about that is that the first follower still needs strong ties and needs to belong to some other community other than themselves. I feel like, right? Like, so if they're trying to keep the dance going at their local dance floor,
Mhm.
maybe belonging to an external community where they dance with other people.
Yeah, I mean,
Right. And that's something I was thinking about my example too, that might have been missing is in that scenario, it was like a change of organization situation. So there wasn't really any um, continuing relationship kind of thing. Right. But that likely that first follower needs to belong to something to help keep, keep the beliefs and the practices, right, and those kinds of things, right. And so yeah, supporting that first follower even if you walk away. I think we're kind of going into your next topic here a little bit, to aiming to make yourself redundant, right.
yeah,
um
yeah. I mean,
but
that's basically goes into
yeah,
introducing people to the rest of the guild, right? I mean, bring
yes.
along to conferences, have them be introduce them to a podcast like the Mob Mentality Show. Who knows? Getting people to know that there are others out there. I'm not the only one introducing people to mob programming. There are more of
Right.
us. Now you're also part of the guild. Uh, Join the meetups, go to the conferences, listen to the shows, engage, and spread the word. So I
Nice.
think that you really onto something there about supporting. You can't just say good, great, you have it, and I'm out of here. It's you really need to give them sort of check that okay, they seem to be doing just fine without me. That's my
Yeah.
cue. I should go forth and do good somewhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and what's funny about it is that going back on personal history a little bit, Chris was my external person for a little bit. So when I was
nice.
trying to get the dance going at another place, I was relying heavily on Chris for information or this or that, or how do you handle this. And so yeah, so I think even when I was a first follower trying to find the next follower, it might have died quite quickly unless I had Chris or someone like Chris, you know what I mean? And so yeah, yeah.
We always need sort of external validation that the
Yeah,
ideas we have, they're not just figments of our imagination.
right.
We're not utterly deranged. No, it actually works. It's a nice little cycle of everyone needs to have that outsider that sort of says, here's a success story. Oh, you've run
Right.
into that problem. I know that. I did it a couple of years ago. This is how we handled it. We all need that, and that's really building the guild, so to speak, and sharing stories and sharing the knowledge and experiences. That's what's all about, and getting people into knowing that there's a system and aid to have if required, and we all require help every once in a while.
Right. And
So
I do think like, when we were first getting started, there like really wasn't that external example, and we may have been the only ones doing it. But I think that, like I said, the catalyst of the emergency and then the retrospectives, right? And so, um, there's certainly like trying to adopt the practice versus like something new coming about, and that can be difficult because you're trying to prove it, unless people have basically said like nothing else has worked, right? So then they do whatever you want, nothing else has worked. And then
yeah,
so um I would encourage, yeah, like if it exists and reaching out, but also if there is an emergency and people are out of ideas, sometimes trying something drastically different can be the catalyst that you need to create something different. And so I think in my career I've seen three big emergencies that have led to something like that, where it was like even military contracting going from like pure waterfall development to no estimates continuous delivery in like a single sentence. It was like, oh, this is an emergency. We need to do it now. Okay, well, we don't have to estimate. We can just start working on it and give you something tomorrow. Um, and so, it's like it's just stuff where it's just like everybody's like, okay, we're gonna just throw a lot of this like other stuff out the window. That's an interesting experience as well. And so, but one thing that I think Willem talks about is like the anthropologist is like just like documenting when something happens where it's like unique for the team or something that happened out of nowhere, and then trying to communicate that so it lives on, even if because I think the original intent of the developer who was saying, let's get into a room and work on this actual work rather than a learning session together on it. I think their intent was like get together, solve a problem together, and then leave. But it turned out to be retrospective after retrospective. It's like, let's do this tomorrow. Let's do this tomorrow. Let's do this tomorrow. And so yeah, I think you have these like bigger catalysts from time to time, and then you have the like iterative, increases, and you got to keep your eye out for both and make sure both are happening. The worst place to be is like comfortable stagnation, right? It's
Oh
like
God, stagnation is death. Stagnation equals death.
Yeah.
Hands down. Hands
I
down.
see a lot of companies where it's like they're just like, oh yeah, what we're doing is working for us, but they're just on a kind of a slow decline constantly, right?
Good luck with that.
Yeah.
Good luck with that. I mean, there's don't get me wrong. There's something to be said for feeling comfortable, but it can't equate stagnation. You can be you can be secure. You can have the psychological safety that there a lot of things can shift and change and will are all around you, and at the most the worst possible times. But it's okay, because you got a bunch of friends all around you. They got your back. I mean, that's building that sense is key in order to actually truly actually collaborate, work together for real, and not just pretending. Because you need to trust one another to say, okay, I will show you all my coding and logic warts and flaws. You show me yours, and that's okay. Maybe we can sort of figure out something in between there that actually works. And if we can bring a few more people into the mix, the better.
Right.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, I love that tie into vulnerability there, and I think that helps make the bar lower. One analysis thought, and then I'll kick us to the next topic, because I think we're kind of getting there a little bit already, is maybe one thread I've noticed throughout is this kind of idea of keystone habit, of where once you're comfortable with changing one thing, like Chris, it's almost sounded like it was either retros or mobbing or learning time or something like that. That's the gateway to change anything, right? So it's kind of like in non-technical, non-mobbing examples, like once someone's exercising, all of a sudden they're able to change their habits in other areas as well, and so it's just the gateway. And I think thinking about that makes me wonder too, this topic of making yourself redundant. But Lennart, like, I want to be needed, and I want the team to depend on me wholeheartedly. And if I leave, they should just crumble. I mean, that just shows how good of a leader I am, right?
Exactly, it's flattering. It's obviously. I mean, if you're not keeping this house of cards up, who will?
Right.
Yeah. Well, jokes aside, being redundant is always, in this sense, is always about being redundant in a particular context. There are other contexts that will most assuredly need you, especially now that you've
thank God.
accumulated additional experiences and know-how, and you will just be better off, and they will be better off for having you somewhere else doing more good, additional good, other good, just not here, because they don't quite need you any longer, not to the extent that others might. And honestly, you probably need that other place in order to not stagnate. You need to switch context every once in a while to not end up in stagnation, in the pit of stagnation. So and like I said previously, it doesn't have to be drastic in the sense of, right, I see that you're great at mob programming now, I quit. I leave on Monday. It doesn't have to be that. Can just be something as, easing into, fading into the background and saying, you know what? I'm just around the bend if you need me, but I'll go help these others now.
Right.
Holler at me if you need me. Or it can be as drastic as saying, you know what, I'm going to go find some entirely different place, and I'm going to move to Antarctica because McMurdoch base, they need mob programming.
Yeah. I think about this a lot, and I think, I don't know, in the last maybe 4 or 5 years, there are even mobs where I see like something becomes like insular into the team. And so at times encouraging just visiting so that you can see another example of mobbing, right? And that's like I'm really afraid of stagnation, I guess. Like you're kind of going back to the stagnation death thing.
You should fear it.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's interesting because it's like, okay, is there some level of like, you can do what you want, but like, you should at least observe something different at some point. So that if it does spark an idea in you later, then you'd be fortunate enough to have seen a different way later, right? Something like that. I think that concept is really important.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, that just harkens back to lost my thread there. Just harkens back to this notion of nope, I've lost it.
All good, all good. No worries. Hold that thought.
It'll come back. It'll come back if I don't choose it, for sure.
I have a question for you that I'm curious your take on this. I don't know if it's personality or situation or system. It's probably all the things. But there are times where it almost reminds me of, it's kind of going back to the half-hearted first follower a little bit, but it reminds me of this analogy that someone gave where it's someone who gives a lot of indications that they're on board, and it looks like, oh, you can be the person that's going to replace me so I can go help another team, right? And it's like the analogy is like if you're driving behind someone on the freeway and they have their blinker on to go into the left lane, but they never go. You know what I mean? It's just like just continual blinker on. And you're like, do I go around them? If I start to go around them, then they'll turn, and then I'll crash into them. Is this like people, certain types of team members who are fairly enthusiastic, given a strong voice to do TDD or to do mob, but given that strong voice isn't there, it almost seems like apathy reigns or something. Have you ever encountered this?
Yeah.
And, because it's easier to replace yourself with someone who's just like, they're just bananas about mobbing or TDD, and they've just like caught the bug and they're just over eager and excited, and you know what I mean? They're probably replacing you before you even think about it because they're just so into it, right? You know what I mean? Like it's quite natural in that regard.
Exactly.
What does it mean when that's not happening and you have this in-between thing?
Well, it probably means that once you leave for one reason or the other, the mob will, just fall apart.
Right.
Can you introduce someone that is as bananas or even more bananas about mob programming than you?
Yes.
Good. Do that then. One way, and if you end up truly in this middle ground of, I'm not quite sure about one or the other of the team members, there might be multiple that are maybe they will still do this. You could combine this with our previous topic of having them. How about you introduce others to mob programming? You can just sort of do it with some acting as a supervisor. You can say, okay, so you're thinking about running the mob, the rest of you, without me. That's great. That's where we want to end up. How about we go out, we talk to a couple other teams in the company, we introduce them to mob programming. I'll just be there like a fly on the wall, and I'll be there and hold your hand if you need to, but you get to introduce them to mob programming. This is your graduation, so to speak. And that can be used in order to, going back to the notion of see one, do one, teach one. So you have actually transformed those people that they were curious about mob programming or whatever practice and habits you want to instill, and now they're teaching it, introducing others to that habit. And in doing so, you can also pick up, did I convey my know-how and my knowledge and my insights about this? You hear that a lot when you hear people navigating others. I mean, we've all seen that it's a microcosm in a mob. When we're in a mob and we hear a navigator instructing the driver, we can just be there and we hear whether or not the navigator has the same understanding or a deeper understanding or a flawed understanding of the problem and the solution as we have. And sometimes that is just information to us going, oh, I didn't actually fully grasp this, or no, they didn't grasp the problem. Ouch. Okay, now it's time to step in and sort of navigate the navigators. And you can sort of just take this along to the next level in the sense of, if you want to facilitate the mob facilitators, so to speak, you can do that. You can give that a try, which is also a great way of doing a show and tell for the rest of the company. Probably not all teams are doing mob programming yet. If so, this is a great opportunity of saying, hey, we've been doing this for 6 months. It works great for us. You should give it a try. We'll make it easy for you to give it a try, because now we've got 4 or 5 people that are having the experience of mob programming, and we'll run introductory workshops internally. So you can use that, for example.
Nice.
And then I've been doing a little bit of that, especially at one of the last companies I worked with, where we basically put together a little bit of a curriculum for new employees and new junior developers, bunched them together into mobs, and I had people that I had introduced to mob programming, basically facilitating them and helping them getting going, and also not just mob programming, but skills like TDD and the problem domain and the typical solutions that company was applying, all of that jazz. And it was really, really gratifying just seeing how much at least some people had picked up, to the extent that they have become the teachers. Now I have become the master. That was really gratifying seeing.
Yeah.
That's
That's
a
so
good one.
cool. Yeah. And I think a light bulb, sorry to jump in again, Chris, real quick, because I know we might be getting close, is well, as you were talking, light bulbs really went off for me, because I think I seen one model of how kind of the mob facilitator role took off. And I think it was in a case where someone was an eager, passionate person. So as soon as there was a vacancy, they just stepped in and took it, right? Like, hey, I see that, we haven't heard from so-and-so, and they just started facilitating the mob. Or, hey, we haven't refactored, would you guys like to refactor? And so they just naturally stepped into that role after seeing someone else do it. And then there was a vacancy, right? Where if it isn't that kind of person, it's almost kind of like you said, you have to keep coaching the coach or navigating the navigator until you're observing that they are doing it, and then you can leave. Because if you leave before that point, the system is basically set up for it to, it's not surprising at all that it just stops happening, right?
But this is just the exact same thing as with any other skill that a mob needs in order to do their job.
Right.
If you don't have someone or a number of people that actually are good at test-driven development and know how to teach others, how to instruct others into that practice, they won't be doing it. If you don't have at least one member of the mob that knows all the ins and outs of the database that you're using and working with, you either always have to have some database expert on call to bring into the mob, or they simply will not be doing a good job at working with that database and some indices will not be created and performance will be terrible and all of that jazz. But it always comes back to the one that knows the most should be coaching, in the sense that if I know the most in the mob about X, I shouldn't be doing it. I should be coaching the rest on how to do it. That's the way you at least maximize the knowledge sharing, the spread of the knowledge sharing, and making sure that there are more people knowing the stuff that needs to be known, so that you can take, a sabbatical, and that no one will give you a ring on the phone and scream in terror because things have gone down and you're the only one who knows this. I mean, that's truly the power of a mob. You're redundant, and that's a good thing.
All right. Well, I would love to keep going, but we have reached our time box. So, Lennart, is there anything that you'd like to plug or share before we sign off here?
I'll plug myself then. I'm available for getting people introduced to organizations and teams to introduce to mob programming. So if anyone wants to give that a go, just shout at me. Other than that, well, I'll plug this. I'll plug this show. I'll plug the Mob Mentality show, because, as we mentioned earlier, it's we need to have a guild. We need to have shared experiences, and you're doing great work. You're doing a great job at it. So I greatly appreciate you for it. Thank you very much, and it's been an absolute pleasure joining and being part of that guild. Thank you.
Awesome. We're happy that we were able to have you on the show. To all of our listeners and viewers, if you know somebody who's maybe trying to introduce mobbing to their team, you might want to share this episode with them. If you have some experiences similar, please leave a comment, like, subscribe, ring the notification bell, all those things. And, we thank you for listening. And Lennart, thank you for joining us today. And we will see everybody next time. Bye, everybody.
See ya. Thanks so
Bye.
much.